So my goal here is to attempt to use the module for my contribution activity as an opportunity to practice reflective competence by connecting the work that we're doing on our vision framework, our instructional base, and agile thinking, but also modeling the messy process that I'm advocating for. So, taking a look at where we're coming from, at first we had the vision frameworks, and then I continued to articulate that. I think this was in Module 3 when we started talking about our classrooms or learning spaces. And I further articulated the things that I find that are important through, for example, my emphasis on capacities as opposed to content, because to me, capacities shows that content is equally important and emphasized as mindsets and skills development are. So these things were, they came from the vision and my goals, and I'm further articulating them in the learning spaces as we move forward toward our work on agile thinking and instructional bases. But also some through lines and some patterns start to form, in terms of things that I, also like to bring to the classroom: play, joy, compassion, stewardship, things like that, and authenticity in terms of inquiry. They are beginning to, be highlighted through this. And then we were asked to think about agile thinking. The things that came to mind is I was focusing on this idea that agile thinking is simple. So I focused on mindsets and capacities like messiness and wild mind, which are a little abstract, but I think that they better highlight the layered capacities that are built up over time to allow us to get to the point where we can be agile in our thinking in terms of the learning environment. And speaking of that, I'm going to, switch from using messiness to describing it as a fractile learning environment. And the reason for that is it's not just messy, right? There's a method, there's a kind of a harmony to the chaos, if you will. So the next step was I started, working on meta concepts that were, or trying to articulate meta concepts that I think define the practices through which I have developed agile thinking, and I think other people can as well. And things like, so these are abstract again: windows and mirrors, culturally responsive teaching. They can be abstract to someone who doesn't practice them every day, but these are the things that I think that are the most important, the concepts that best define what I do in the classroom and that I hope to advocate for. Now, in terms of messiness versus fractal teaching, I like to use the metaphor of Indra's net, which is a Buddhist concept, to articulate that concept of fractal learning and the difference between fractal learning and messy learning, although it's really a matter of emphasis and semantics. But the metaphor might be important. And Indra's net, you can see in the picture, Indra's net is the idea, the metaphor is, it's about interconnectedness. And the metaphor is that if you look at a spider web, and if the spider web had a dewdrop at every nexus on the web, each of those dewdrops would serve as a mirror reflecting all of the other dewdrops. And, this brings together this idea of the interconnectedness of all things. And I do see this as more reflective of what we do in the classroom. It's very, very hard to categorize it and to break it up and to taxonomize it sometimes. Sometimes it just all flows together and we have to focus on that flow. But we are also, responsible for making that flow intelligible and accessible to other people. So I'm focused on these concepts. And, when I was working in the lounge activity, Scott and Kyle got to listen to my messy process there. And speaking of messy processes, this is where I'm at in terms of moving from the meta concepts to, I've got my meta concepts, I'm trying to articulate them through brainstorming and workshopping a catalog of reflective questions, ideas, and entry points. And a lot of things that are coming in here, I like informing my teaching and learning through the work of Emily Style and culturally responsive teaching, rather. And you could see some quotes from her on here. Also, a shout out to Elizabeth Swanson. She, reminded me that, in my emphasis on culturally responsive teaching and universality of access, I should, probably emphasize the knowledge of human development, especially as I work with MYP students in grades 6 to 10. So this is, these are kind of the dewdrops on the, like the web of Indra's net. As I'm saying, these are all collected dewdrops, and I'm beginning to kind of list them. But over in the third column on the right, I do have them I have them listed as meta practices that I tend to favor in the classroom. But there's a reason why the rows have been merged. I think that reflects this kind of organic process. It's hard to categorize them. So here's a meta concept, and here are the meta practices that I use. These meta practices can be deployed and used to support all of those meta concepts that then build together to create a praxis, of practice and of thinking and research that create that deceptively simple agile thinking, right? It's, the tortured metaphor of the cliche of the iceberg, so much more is beneath the surface. And this is where I'm at in the process of trying to articulate that. So, thank you for listening. It just went 2 minutes longer than I wanted it to, and I know that there was a heavy element of Charlie Day from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia there. So, thank you for watching my messy process, and hopefully that made sense, what I'm trying to articulate in terms of reflective competence, in terms of messiness, fractal learning, I should say, and in terms of the things that we're being asked to do in the course in terms of reflecting on our practice. Repeated practice too many times. Thanks for listening.